on now? Nope. Is this on now? Nope. Hello? Hey guys, can you turn on the mic? How about now? Nope. How about now? Yes, now. There we go. And a hush fell over the crowd. Hush. My sons were in Boy Scouts, and there's a lot of good things about Boy Scouts, but one of the best things about it was when you have like older boys like leading things, right? That's the whole purpose of Boy Scouts. For those of you that don't know, it's to develop uh, young men and now young women into leaders. That's the whole. That's the mission of what are they called now? Scouts of America or something like that. But anyway, but you would have these boys that were 14 or 15 that had been in Scouts their whole life, and then they would be in front of these big groups of people, like this, in front of thousands of people, um, and and they would be putting on these like skits and things, trying to get the younger boys in the crowd kind of like revved up and ready to go. And one day we were at an and this young man, he was trying to get the crowd quietened down. And I mean, when you think about it, when you're in a group of Boy Scouts, you're talking about boys from ages 11 to 18. Well, especially boys ages 11 to probably 13, they can be tough to quieten down. And so he said, and a hush fell over the crowd. Hush. And everybody erupted in laughter, and then they got quiet. That was a good story. So, great news. Hush. A great news for everybody. Larry McNabb is going to take over this post starting next week. He would be here right now, but he's not. And so that's why he's not here today, because he's not here. So you get one more week of me trying to finish this out. All right, so let's get going. That's enough of my buffoonery. There will be more, but not for a minute. Okay, so we are still in Ezekiel, or excuse me, we're this week. You were supposed to read pages 1042 to 1049. That was your assignment this week. And so, to quote the famous Nashville preacher Walt Lever, I'm not asking for a show of hands here, but just answer this. I'm going to be fighting with this thing all morning, and so I should just give up now. But so not asking for a show of hands or a verbal response, but just in your own minds, how many people read that this week? So just think. I did not ask for a show of hands. What part of did not ask for a show of hands do you not get? Golly. So I know at least one person read it this week because she showed her hand. So that's question number one. And so if you did read, would you say that you understood most of it, that you understood some of it, or that you understood precious little of it? Right? So you're answering that in your own mind, okay? Right. So I did or I didn't read it, and if I did read it, I understood most of it, some of it, or a little of it. Noah, do you have that video queued up? So Noah has a video for us that we're going to watch, and this is from the Bible Project. Many of you are familiar with these types of videos. So this is a portion from the video about Ezekiel. I really like this as a resource because I am a person that wishes I could draw. I have always wanted to, as a child, I wanted to be an illustrator. But unfortunately, these hands are good for typing, and that's about it. I learned they're not very good for cleaning out fence rows over the holiday because I'm sore all over. Oh, it's ready. I'm sorry, my bad. Go ahead and play it.
The book of the prophet Ezekiel. Ezekiel was a priest who had been living in Jerusalem during the first Babylonian attack on the city. And they spared the city, but they took a first wave of Israelite prisoners and hauled them off into exile, and Ezekiel was among them. So the book begins 5 years after all that, and Ezekiel is sitting on the bank of an irrigation canal near his Israelite refugee camp, and it's his 30th birthday, no less, the year that he would have been installed as a priest in Jerusalem. And then all of a sudden, Ezekiel has this vision. He sees a storm cloud approaching, and then inside the cloud are 4 strange creatures that have wings outstretched and touching each other. And these creatures each had 4 faces. And then he saw 4 wheels, one by each creature. And then he saw that the wings of the creatures were supporting this dazzling platform, and then on that platform is a throne, and then sitting on that throne is this human-like creature, glowing and shrouded in fire. And then all of a sudden Ezekiel realizes what he's seeing. He calls it the appearance of the likeness of the glory of the Lord. It's God riding his royal throne chariot. Now the word glory, in Hebrew it's kavod, it means heavy or significant. The biblical authors use this word to describe the physical appearance and manifestation of God's significance when he shows up in person. These images in the vision, they're very similar to what happened when God appeared on Mount Sinai in the book of Exodus. And it's also very similar to the depictions of God's presence over the Ark of the Covenant. And that's actually the most shocking thing about Ezekiel's vision. What is God's glory doing in Babylon? It's supposed to be above the Ark of the Covenant, in the temple in Jerusalem. And so the first section of the book opens to explore that question as Ezekiel begins to accuse Israel of rebellion. So God first speaks to Ezekiel from the throne chariot, and he commissions him as a prophet. Ezekiel is to accuse Israel of breaking their covenant agreement with God in a couple ways. Israel has given their allegiance to other gods and has been worshiping idols, and this has all led to rampant social injustice and violence. And so as a result, God appoints Ezekiel to warn the people. The first Babylonian attack that took Ezekiel into exile is going to be matched by another, and Jerusalem, its temple, all face imminent destruction. So Ezekiel uses words and more to get his message across. He also performs sign acts. These were a form of street theater. Ezekiel would go out in public and start behaving in these really bizarre ways that were like parables of his prophetic message. So he was supposed to build a tiny model of Jerusalem and then stage an attack on it. Or he was to shave off all of his hair and then chop it up with a sword. Or the most extreme, he was to play the role of the scapegoat on the Day of Atonement. And he would lay on his side for over a year, eating food cooked over poop, as a sign of the nasty food that people will have to eat during the siege of Jerusalem. And perhaps the most disheartening thing of all is the bad news God gave Ezekiel that no one was going to listen to him. Israel would reject him because of their rebellious and hard heart. And this recalls Moses' description of the people after the wilderness rebellions, when he predicted that exile would one day happen, and Ezekiel had the unfortunate privilege of seeing it all come to pass. And so a dismayed Ezekiel, he begins to perform his task. And after about a year, he has another vision. This one is about the temple. He goes on this virtual tour of the temple, and he sees what's happening there in his absence, and it is not good. In the outer courtyard in front of the temple, he sees this large idol statue. And then he sees the elders of Israel worshiping other gods, both outside and inside the temple. And then he sees the women of Israel. They're worshiping a Babylonian god named Tammuz. And the vision ends with God's glorious throne chariot moving up and away from the temple. It's leaving, going east, headed towards Babylon. And so in chapter 11, we come to see why and how God's glory appeared to Ezekiel there in Babylon. Israel's idolatry and their covenant violations, it's become so blatant and offensive that God has left his temple. They've driven him away, and he consigns it to destruction. But God hasn't abandoned his people. Rather, he goes into exile with them. And so at the end of this vision in chapter 11, God promises that he will return a remnant of Israel back to the land, and he'll transform them by removing their heart of stone and giving them a new, soft heart of flesh, so that they can love and truly follow their God after all. This is a small glimmer of hope, and it's quickly submerged under the reality of the imminent destruction. But chapter 11, it's a key transition, and it helps us understand how the rest of the book has been designed. So the next three...
All right. Thanks a lot, Noah. So, now, with just, some of this video, so here's question number 3. If you did read this week, after just watching this video, did your understanding increase? Were there some things that when you read, you were like, I wonder what that means? But then you saw this information or this explanation or this background, and you're like, oh, okay, yeah, that makes more sense. But if you didn't have an opportunity to read the daily Bible stuff this week, after seeing this, do you say to yourself, wow, okay, I see maybe what some of this stuff means. And you know what? I'm going to, this afternoon or this evening, I'm going to go read those 7 or 8 pages out of the daily Bible that I have sitting at my house. Again, not asking for response. You just have to, are you more likely, if you didn't read this week, are you more likely to read now that you've seen this? And so I'm being paid to shill for this. No, I'm not. So this is just a good, simple example of my purpose this morning. So this is my parting shot, because I'm going to go on sabbatical for a little while. Is that understanding the bigger story, understanding some of the details, because this video, I like these videos, like I said, because I like the illustration. I have a simple mind, and so I need pictures like a kindergartner. But I like how it's laid out. I like how it's very orderly. That just appeals to my rows and column nature. But I also like that there's some details in here that come from earlier in the story, that come from up here, that if you don't know those details or you don't know that part of the story, you might have missed when you were reading this week. I certainly miss some of those things. And so what I'm encouraging you today is that understanding the broad story, the big story, cover to cover, is important. And if you don't, I really want to encourage you to do that. Our brains process all new information based upon what we already know, right? That's why in high school, you didn't start off with, you start off with particle physics. You don't start off with like string theory and wormholes and all that crazy stuff. You start off with like the stuff that's pretty easy to understand, and you move to the things that are harder to understand. Because our brain takes everything that's coming in anew and going, this person is telling me this is what I already know. How do I interlace those things together? So the importance of understanding the background information or the big picture, and I'm going to use the term the Bible, but I'm not, sometimes I like to separate the idea of this written volume versus the Word of God. Go. No cross. Okay. Well, if there was a cross back there, the person that hung on that cross, that is the Word. That is the Lord's Word. And I often say that these are the words of God, right? But this is what we have, right? This is what we have. And understanding this, at least the plot or the big picture, not every detail of every single story, right? I mean, Noah got, for Christmas, Noah got the film version of the book War and Peace. And he's been watching on that for I don't know how long. Well, War and Peace is classically an enormously thick book. Well, this is an enormously thick book, right? even this fairly easy to read print version with no notes. So I'm not suggesting that you know every single detail, but what I am suggesting is that if you broadly understand what's happening in the big story, cover to cover, it's going to help you understand how each of these little stories, like the book of Jeremiah or the book of Ezekiel or the book of whatever, fits into the whole. And if you have that, then that is going to make a big difference. You're going to get to know the Lord better, and then that was going to change your life and the lives of the people around you. So inside of all this, I'm going to try to share like my story of like how I got to where I am, how I got to wearing these sport coats. So for a lot of years, I struggled to understand the big story, right? It was hard for me to understand a lot, especially what was happening in the middle of this of the Bible. And when I say the middle, what I really mean is the part between Exodus and Matthew. You know, that's a lot. There's a lot between Exodus and Matthew. In fact, you know, to give you a visual, that is going to be, that's that, right? That's a lot of it. That's a big part. That's a big part. Now, I'm not asking for a show of hands, but it's possible that at least one other person in this audience might struggle to understand what's happening between Exodus and Matthew, right? For all kinds of reasons. Oh, I told you, no show of hands. Can you people not follow? I'm just kidding. And so to me, our readings this week from Ezekiel are a great example, right? That's not easy to understand, right? It's not easy to understand. Now, when you watch a video like this, you're like, oh, okay. Yeah, that makes sense. But when you read in Ezekiel, so first off, Ezekiel is 48 chapters. That's a commitment, right? That is a commitment. That is long. I am a person who enjoys reading car magazines because it's pretty short. And it has big, colorful pictures and little charts and graphs and facts and figures, so I just love it so much. But 48 chapters is a lot. It's a lot to take on. And when the book begins with, for example, a description of these creatures that have 4 faces and 6 wings, and there's wheels, and the wheels are covered in eyes, well, that's hard for me to kind of wrap my brain around. That simple illustration is very helpful to me. I have no idea if that's what Ezekiel saw. But it helps me go, okay, yeah, so that could be what it looks like. That's something for me to kind of grab onto in this, this groping in the darkness. But then Ezekiel talks about King Jehoiachin. Well, who's that guy? I never heard of that guy. Hopefully you have. So just bear with me. So who is this guy? Now, was he a good king or was he a bad king? Where does this king fit into the kings? Like, was he close to David or was he further down the line? And what about this glowing metal man, right, that's on the throne? Is that Jesus? Is that God? Who is that? So just in the first few paragraphs of the book of Ezekiel, there is a lot of questions that are raised, at least for me. This is kind of like a few years ago me, not necessarily today me. But hopefully you can see that a book like Ezekiel is kind of difficult to understand. And for me, the most difficult books to understand are those that are written poetically. I'm one of those people that thinks a poem should rhyme. But guess what? Hebrew poetry doesn't rhyme in English, and I don't even think it rhymes in Hebrew. But those poetic books, which are a lot of that middle portion, most of the prophets write in not prose, not in narrative, but they write in this poetic form, right? And so those are difficult for me to understand. So as a result, you may be different. But as a result, things that are hard for me to understand, I tend to shy away from. I'm like, you know what? I'll read that a different day. I'll work on that sometime later. And so another example of that is marriage improvement books. You know, we've gone through all types of marriage improvement classes over the years, and one of the things that we identified is that you guys have probably heard this term, words of encouragement. Has anybody ever heard, like in a marriage class, even young Jake, even he, married so short a time, he understands words of encouragement. Well, I didn't really understand that concept, so I told Melanie, I was like, I encourage you to get some supper ready because I'm hungry. And so she was like, no, I don't think that's what that means. So my lack of background understanding really kind of hurt my implementation of those concepts. Jeremiah is a good example of this as well. You know, we've talked about how the book of Jeremiah moves all around in a timeline. And if you just read Jeremiah outright, it's like he just keeps saying the same thing over and over and over and over. But if you understand that he is talking to different groups of people in different times, then you're like, oh, okay. That makes a little more sense. But if you don't understand that, you might think that this is not helpful and you may shy away from it. So for me personally, for years and years, I had not read through the entire Bible. I might get a start on Isaiah, but, you know, after 4 or 5 chapters, I'm like, man, I don't know what's going on here. I want to pick up the latest copy of Motor Trend, see what's happening in there. And so, because I didn't understand the broad story, and I didn't understand where these books in the middle fit in, I was missing the big picture, and I couldn't make it fit into the parts that I did know, because I just knew what happened at the very beginning, and I knew kind of what happened at the very end. It was hard for me to put these things together based upon what little I did know. So I found myself in this trap, this like circular trap. It was hard for me to take in new stuff because I didn't understand it, but my understanding wasn't growing because I wasn't taking in new stuff. And so I found myself on this like sea of ignorance for many years of my adult life. Now, perhaps I am completely alone in that journey, but I suspect not. I suspect this is what happens to a lot of us, is we get to a certain point of understanding, and then we hit a wall of things that are like, what's all this about? I'm not really sure. And so you just kind of read Motor Trend or the newspaper or whatever, a novel, whatever it is that people read. I'm not necessarily a book reader. And so you're kind of stuck, right? You're kind of stuck with where you are. So that's my first point. So one of the things I would tell myself is my second point, which is, well, you know what? This is not a salvation issue. Salvation issue. Has anybody ever heard that? Mark, have you ever heard that term? This is not salvation. Even Mark's heard that term. Thank you for being here, Mark. I appreciate you. And so I'm like, you know what? If I don't understand what's going on in Ezekiel, I don't think that's going to keep me or anybody else out of heaven. I mean, Ezekiel, what's up with all those eyes on the wheels? And why do I need to know that? Well, that attitude or excuse, I mean, that was just a barrier for me. That was just a way for me to go, hey, I know who Jesus is, and I know what he did, and I know how he has impacted my life and how he impacted the world and what he did. And, like, that's the most important thing. But, like, that became a wall for me to not increase my learning. Every part of God's story, even that stuff in the middle, is important, right? If it wasn't, it wouldn't be there, right? The Lord has preserved these stories about what he did in the lives of these people for not hundreds, but thousands of years. This has come down through the ages to you and I in this highly portable and handy format today. And if it's not important, then it wouldn't be in there. And for me to put up a barrier to prevent understanding the Lord better is pretty short-sighted. So, for example, there is a term that we read in Ezekiel that really resonates with Jesus in the New Testament. There is a preferred name that Jesus uses for himself. Does anybody know that connection between that name that Jesus uses in the book of Ezekiel? It's a very short term. It's 3 words. Carlos. Son of Man. Jesus frequently calls him, he says, the Son of Man will do this, and the Son of Man will do, these things will have to happen to the Son of Man, right? We read that all through the Gospels. Well, lo and behold, hundreds and hundreds of years earlier, when the Lord is speaking to Ezekiel, he uses that term. He says, Son of Man, I want you to take this message. Is it possible that those 2 things are connected, or was Jesus just like, you know what, I like the sound of that. That sounds good. I think I'll pick that. There's probably something there. But if I have not read Ezekiel, or if I have read it but don't really understand what's going on, I'm going to miss that. And if I miss that, I wonder if there's some other stuff in the middle that impacts what Jesus says and what he does that I might be missing as well, or that I was missing as well for a very, very long time. Where am I? And so in the middle, we find Jesus all throughout these stories, not just in the last, couple hundred pages. And so if you want to know Jesus and you want to be like Jesus, you can't limit yourself to just one portion of his story. So, at what point did things come together for me, right? At what point did I overcome, did I get off of the sea of ignorance? I can't exactly tell you a specific moment, but I can tell you that it has been in the 17 years that I have been here at Greenwood Park. So we arrived here in late 2008. And, I've been in church all of my life. Isn't that right, Carlos? Carlos knows. If Barry Renault was here, he'd be able to testify. He'd be like, yeah, I saw Jared. He was in church all the time. And I arrived here in my mid-30s with a bunch of kids and a wife. And we sat over there, kind of around where Shannon Pardue was sitting. Maybe a little bit more forward, but not so far as Jake. And we were just Christians, doing Christian stuff. And so I can't tell you exactly when it happened, but I can for 100% sure tell you why it happened. What happened that jolted me into a better understanding of God's word? And that's this: standing up here in front of you people, waving my arms around. Teaching is what pushed me out of where I was, kind of in the doldrums. And so whether you're forgot a quick point. So I asked everybody, hey, who read those 8 pages, right? Who read Ezekiel chapter 3 through 11? Well, you know who did read it? Me. Yeah, for sure. A few times. I may have listened to it. I may have read it a few times. So I had to. I can't just get up here and talk about this without having read it, to some degree, understood it. And when you have that type of pressure, you are going to force yourself to put down the car magazine and to turn off the TV, and you're going to force yourself to learn, right? And that's what happened. That's how I did it. And so, whether you're teaching 3-year-olds or 13-year-olds or 30-year-olds, being forced to understand it, being forced to look into it, is an excellent way to do that. And so one of the things that I found that was helpful to me in like broadening my understanding is a simple diagram that took, and when I say simple, I mean the individuals who put this together, it probably took them a very long time to do it. But it simply took a list of all the kings of Israel, right? And beside all those kings, it put all of the prophets that were prophesying during the reign of those kings. Because that information is not necessarily lined up in our Bible, right? Because we have the history parts first, and then we have the prophecy part second. Well, if you're missing what's in the middle and you don't understand that, then that's a problem. But if you have something that kind of lines those things up for you, if you're a rows and columns kind of guy or gal, then you're like, oh, Hosea was prophesying to the people of the northern kingdom of Israel during the reign of somebody. I should know that. Right? Oh, okay. Okay, so I can go back and I can read about the reign of this person in this place at this time in Kings and Chronicles. And now I can go read Hosea and go, okay, these historical activities were happening, and this is what Hosea was saying. And I can connect those two things. Now, all of you are very smart because you're at Sunday school. You could have been in bed, right? You could have been at home enjoying your coffee, but you came to Sunday school, so you're all very smart people. And you probably knew that. But you know what? I never really connected that. But just that one simple thing was very helpful for me, and it changed how I saw the big picture. And suddenly, slowly, can things be sudden and slow? Slowly, but suddenly, I was like, wait a minute, uh-oh, I think I understand what's going on in the middle. And that made all the difference in the world. Concepts like there being the two kingdoms, the kingdom of Judah and the kingdom of Israel, the idea that there were 0 good kings in the northern kingdom, and there were only a handful in the southern kingdom. The bridge between the end of Joshua and the start of Matthew, all of that became a lot more clear. That's why it happened for me. And so my fourth point is that if you understand this plot, I think I just gave something away. If you understand the big story, it's a lot easier to grow from there, right? If you understand what's happening in the totality of the Bible, then it's a lot easier to take kind of some of the deeper stuff. I know I talked to you guys a lot about the stuff that you were supposed to learn in Western Civ class. And I don't know if you guys know Teresa Kimball. Does anybody know Teresa Kimball? She's shorter, husband's real tall, really good looking. So Teresa came up to me a few weeks ago, and she said, I haven't had a history class since I was a sophomore in high school. And Teresa has a way of communicating that really is very clear. And the intonation of her voice and the way that she looks at you and makes her eyes really big and wags her finger, it's very, you're like, oh, okay, yeah, I understand what you are saying to me. And she gets real close to you, and you're like, oh, you're very frightening. And so she was like, I haven't had a history class since I was a sophomore in high school. And she said, I just don't remember any of that stuff. And she's like, I have just no context for any of it. But then she said something which was disarming. She was like, but I'd like to learn. And I'm like, wow, here's a lady that's forgotten more about Jesus than I'll probably ever know. And yet, there's this thing that makes sense to me and that I understand and that I enjoy. And she's like, I don't know anything about that. That's my Teresa. And I was like, wow, that's really interesting. That's really interesting that this thing that has allowed me to really understand this, she has none of it. That's not how she does it. That's not how she understands. That's not how she has come to know the Lord and understand all these things, yet she still does. So we're not going to talk about Western Civ class. We're going to talk about English, right? Everybody in here has been through a bunch of English classes, right? Even Jake. And so in English class, when we're reading a poem or a novel or an essay or whatever we're reading, a story, there's kind of like two parts of it. There's the what and there's the why. And so what is the term, the very short term that we use to talk about the what, about what's happening in the story? It's the plot. Right, it's the plot. I was good at the plot. I understood, to the degree I could get through it, because I started reading those car magazines really young, right? So to the degree I could get through The Fountainhead, why did I choose that book? So to the degree I could read all the way through it, I was really good at understanding the plot. But then there's this other part, right? It's the why. Well, what's the why? What did we learn in English class? That's the theme. Very good. Way to go. The theme, right? Isn't that what they called it when you guys were in English class? Many of you are in my generation, right? The theme. Melanie? Yes? This means yes. This means no? Yes. The theme, that's right. So the theme is the why. Right? So good versus evil, redemption, coming of age, like the themes, right? That's the why part. And if you were to believe Tracy Inman, renowned English teacher at Greenwood High School, the theme is the important part. The plot is a device to get to the theme, right? Some might say that could be true for this as well. The details of the what help us get to the why. Now, I can just tell you, without the what, I have no chance of reaching the why. That's Jared Smalling. What Teresa helped me understand is that her way of getting to the what is different than my way of getting to the what, but she sure understands the why. And so what I would tell you is that, and this is my last point, if you do not understand the broad story, if you can find a way to get to the what, I believe it's going to help you better understand the why. Let's see here. So as a quick example, Ezekiel is talking to these exiles in Babylon, right? They're far, far away from Jerusalem and Judea, hundreds and hundreds of miles away. Yet Ezekiel is preaching to these people about all this bad stuff that's going to happen in Jerusalem and in Judea, and there's going to be this destruction and it's this idolatry and all this stuff. Well, why is he telling them that? They're already gone, man. There's nothing they can do. Shouldn't he be talking to shouldn't God transplant him way over here, where this is where Jerusalem is and that's where Babylon is, I guess? Why? What's the purpose of that? Well, if you haven't read Jeremiah, you probably don't understand that all these people over here in Babylon, it's the same people, the same group of folks as is over in Jerusalem. They just got moved over here. And the same problems that those people have that's going to cause the destruction over there and judgment over there, these people have those same problems in their pockets. Like, as they traveled along from Jerusalem to Babylon, they didn't just oh, idolatry, we're going to throw that out. I'm fine now. It's the same thing that's happening. And that's why Ezekiel is preaching these messages to them, because this group of people, that's going to be the seed that the remnant is going to come from. And they're going to go back here. But right now, these figs that we talked about last week, right now, they're not good enough. They're not ready to go back yet. right? God has segregated them. He's pulled them over here. But before they become the people who know him and love him and are going to be loyal to him, it's going to be 70 years. And in those 70 years, one of two things is going to happen. Either you're going to have a change of heart and a change of mind, or you're going to die. Because 70 years is a long time. Now, has there ever been a time when the Lord kind of like purged his people earlier in our story, when people kind of like not necessarily had a change of heart, but they just kind of died out? That's right. Way over there in Exodus, way over there, the Lord said, what this group of people is doing is not good enough. And you're going to march around the wilderness for years and years and years until this group dies out. And then I'm going to take your children, I'm going to take them, and we're going into the land. So the Lord is doing another purification exercise. Well, if you can understand, if you can connect those two things, that might be helpful for you. All right. So, just super quick, this idea of having a framework, of having something that helps you make sense of the Bible. That's something that I searched for that's something that I wanted. I didn't search very hard. That's something that I wanted for a long time, was a framework to understand how this happened. So what's worked for me, besides taking the time to do it because I was teaching, is I use history as a framework to help me understand this. Now, I know a lot of you are like, boo, history stinks. And that's fine. I don't like sales. Many of you do. So there's all kinds of things that people like. But when I was able to connect my interest in history, and I was able to connect that into here, because, the history that I like American history, and I like European history. I don't like the history of France too much. That's kind of But I like the history of the late Bronze Age and the early Iron Age. And guess what? That's this. That's this. These people lived and died in that time period. And over time, that's where my interest, I feel like, led by the Holy Spirit, has directed to. I read stuff about ancient Mesopotamia and the stuff that they dug up. Well, guess what? That's when these things were happening. That's my framework. That's the way I understand it. Yours may vary. You may be like Mark Moore. He's a relationship guy. He's a people person, And so he may say, you know what? I understand the Bible through framework, through relationships, parent to child, brothers and sisters, husbands and wives. That's the framework that a sensitive guy like Mark might understand or might use to understand the Bible. And there's probably all kinds of other ways. My encouragement to you this morning as the bell gets ready to ring is if you don't know the story, and I bet some of you don't, if you don't know this story, not every detail, but if you don't know the story cover to cover, figure out something that will help you connect the front of the book to the back of the book, that helps you bridge over whatever it may be. For me, it was history. For Mark, it's his love of relationships. It could be anything. But if you don't have that, in 2026, let this be the last year that you don't have it, right? Figure out a way. Talk to somebody. Talk to Teresa Kimball. She'll talk to you. Talk to Phil Kimball. He'll talk to you too. I bet all they do is just talk. But talk to somebody and figure out what it is that you can use so that you understand that the basic plot of the Bible. And from there, I think you will be surprised at how your understanding of the Lord will grow and your understanding of the themes of the Bible, which is the stuff we're trying to get to, will grow. That's it. I'm Jared Smalling. It's been great. I wish you guys a wonderful 2026.